Hey guys, Haz here at Shield Canine, and today I'm going to be reacting to a video somebody sent me on dog shock collars, how they work, and why you may not want one. And I'm going to be doing this live, so I encourage you guys to comment as you would like to comment. I did not pre-schedule this stream. This is just kind of spur of the moment, like I like to do. So for those of you that don't know, I am a professional dog trainer. I've got thousands of hours on the e-collar with a vast variety of dogs. I've used the e-collar for many things, from behavior modification to competition obedience to protection to so much more. So, you know, I consider myself a subject matter expert. So always interesting to see different videos on the internet and kind of see how e-collars are being talked about and portrayed. This is a video from CNET, and CNET has 3.5 million subscribers. So I think it's kind of like a it looks like a news channel, maybe. So it doesn't look like they're like a dog channel per se. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what the mainstream take on e-collars and e-collar training is. So I'm going to react to this video. Obviously, this is being used for educational purposes. We're not infringing copyright or anything like that. So I'm going to be pausing the video frequently and you know, talking about the things that we see. So let's get started. They sure do run.
They do this. And all of that can sometimes be out of hand. So that's why they make these.
Okay. So, right away, they're kind of opening the discussion by talking about things that dogs do that people may not like. So I kind of see where this is going. They're kind of going to portray the e-collar probably as this electronic club that you use to club behaviors that you don't like. And this is the crudest form of use for the e-collar. So I think I might have some problems with this broadcast, but let's continue on. Let's see what else they have to say. Oh, and by the way, I don't think running is an undesirable behavior. I think most people accept that dogs run and don't have a particular problem with it. At least I hope not.
Array of electronic dog collars that use different stimuli to modify your dog's behavior. Let's see how they do it, and if it's a good idea.
Okay, so right off the hop, this is some junky e-collars, okay? Like, these are garbage e-collars, except with, you know, the sport dog you can say is a decent e-collar. I don't personally like them. I know some trainers do. I don't personally like the sport dog, but I'll admit that it's not a piece of garbage. The rest of these collars are absolute crap. Everything from the Pet Safe to the Dog Care, which is obviously just a Amazon special made in China for probably like $2 or something like this. These are not something that any trainer that has any kind of self-respect or knows anything about the e-collar would ever use in their training. So that's just an initial thing that I'm noticing.
Now, these are often called bark collars.
Hey guys, I see y'all there.
Based on their most common technology. However, they span a wide...
Their e-collar and bark collar are two very different things, okay? Electric collar or shock collar, right, is a collar that has a remote and a receiver, and it's a collar that's designed to be operated by the trainer or by the handler. It is definitely not a bark collar. A bark collar is something that functions more on its own. It perceives through vibration if the dog is barking, and then makes electric stimulation, or in some cases vibration, tone, citronella spray, whatever, depending on the bark collar. But those are two very different things. Also, most dog trainers don't call them shock collars. Shock collar is something that people that either really don't know anything about the topic call them, or people that have an agenda will call them shock collars, because shock has kind of like an icky feeling associated with it.
array of behaviors they target and stimuli they use to modify those. Let's start with the first one that's best known.
Technically, it's static impulse. For those of you wondering, like, the reason why we don't say electric shock is because when you think of putting, you know, your finger in a light socket or touching a live wire, that's really an electric shock. It can actually kind of kill you. These operate more along the lines of a Dr. Ho muscle relaxer, tensor. It creates tension and relaxation in the muscle depending on the level and where you're using it, so on and so forth. It's not like touching a live wire, you know, where you can get burned and so on and so forth.
Electric shock, or as it's known today in more market-friendly verbiage, static.
Oh, there you go.
But minuscule amps. That's why these things don't kill or injure your dog. Now, the electrical shock or static collar uses a couple of electric probes here, like you see there. They're metal. They make contact with the dog's skin. They have
True.
to be through fur to do that. In fact, the manuals for the
Okay, so he's going to talk about, I think, how important it is that the collar be making contact with the dog's skin in order for it to work. So a lot of people screw up right here when they first buy an e-collar, especially when they're kind of more along the lines of individuals that are looking just to kind of electrically club behaviors they don't like. They'll just throw the e-collar on and they're pushing the button and nothing usually happens because it's too loose and it's not making good contact with the dog's skin. The other thing too that most people struggle with are contacts. So depending on the breed will depend on the contacts. For instance, if you have a short-haired dog, you guys can't hear the audio? Really? Why can't you guys hear the audio? When it's playing, you should be able to hear the audio. You guys confirm it, chat. Guys, just confirm with me in the chat if you can hear the audio from the video. I hope so. Anyways, back on what I was saying. Depending on the breed will depend on the contacts. So if you've got like a Doberman, you would use half-inch contacts. If you've got a dog, a German Shepherd or a Lab, you're going to be using 3/4-inch contacts. Husky, you might be using 1-inch contacts or even wings. So, okay, audio's fine. Well, I can't do much about the YouTube audio quality. Some of you are complaining, some of you aren't. So maybe turn up your... Some of you are complaining, some of you... Okay, I'm going to turn up the audio for the video. So hopefully you guys can hear it. And hopefully everything works here. All right. Let's go.
These go to some great length to show you how to get these in there to make contact with skin. Then they pass electrical current, AC by the way, between the two through conductive skin tissue. That's the mechanism of it.
Okay.
Now, many of these, the level of electricity that's passed between these two electrodes can be varied. The problem is, you can't ask your dog for an adjustment. It can either be done in the collar or sometimes on a remote like this. Which brings us to how these are activated. Some of these are activated by barking, the sound and vibration of it. Others also let you do a manual trigger.
Okay, all right. So right off the hop, he's talking about how you can vary the stim level. That's very true. Like most e-collars have like a 0 to 100 variation. Problem is on the low quality ones, like the piece of junk that he's holding, it's a lie really. Like level 1 is not going to be much different than like level 20 on an e-collar Technologies or Dogtra, and level 2 is unfortunately like level 50 or 100 won't be that far off from level 1. So even though it says that there's like a 0 to 100 range, really you've got maybe 20 level range in like the low quality ones. Okay, of course there's a fly here. Okay.
I've got an ability to set the power on this one. I'm going to start here down at 5. That's on a scale of 0 to 99.
So it's true, there really isn't any regulation as far as I know in Canada or in the United States. The problem is that, of course, we get these cheap pieces of junk that are being sold on Amazon, but I'm definitely not somebody that thinks that government regulation will ever improve anything. In fact, it's proven to not. So I don't. Personally, I use Dogtra e-collar Technologies. Some people like Martin systems. I know that they have a strong commitment to their collars. I don't personally love their collars, but some people swear by them. So those are really the brands that I use. I know Garmin's good. I don't personally use Garmin. Again, I know some people swear by Sport Dog. I don't personally use it. But those are really the collar brands that you want to be using. Everything else is generally junk.
Put my fingers across the electrodes. Let's see what happens.
So he's shocking himself by putting his finger across the electrodes. I prefer to use the palm of my hand or the forearm, especially the inside of the forearm, very sensitive. Fingers can be very hot and cold with the stimulation. It's not a reliable way to test the stim.
I don't feel a thing. Let's kick it up to 15. Again, it's on a scale of 99 at the top end. Okay, got that. Uncomfortable.
All right.
Let's try.
Go to 100. Let's see.
Last YouTube video?
35.
Ah, damn it. No, not fun. I won't go.
He should have gone to 100. If he was really a good journalist, he would have gone to 100 and really given people the extremes. We need to know, what's 100 like on that collar?
Beyond that, to be honest. Call me a wimp, but that's very uncomfortable. 99 seems egregious. But this is what these will do in terms of feel. Everyone's going to feel it differently.
Okay, so he said 99 seems egregious. Well, it would really depend on the situation. When you're sitting on a park bench talking about it, for sure it might feel egregious. It would depend on the dog, the pain tolerance of the dog, the situation that the dog is in, the training that you're doing. There's so many variables, which is why it's important to have a variety in your stim that's available to you, right? Like I've met some dogs that will walk through 100 on the e-collar with like barely a twitch, and I've met some dogs that act like they're dying at level 10. Also things like dopamine levels, adrenaline dumps, external stimuli. There's so many different things that can impact how a dog is perceiving the collar, and that's why you need to have a variety of options available to you in the stimulation. And of course, once you know your dog, you know what collar is best to use.
So let's get some science behind this.
Oh, he's going to use a voltage detector. I'm betting with the voltage, he's not going to see a big difference between a low level and a high level because it's a piece of junk collar. But let's see.
House across this. Picking it up there at 35 on the range. But that doesn't quantify it either. So what I'm going to do is hook this thing up to a multimeter. We've got our flip meter here. I've got it set to AC voltage. We just take and put our probes across the terminals.
All right, I'll just forward it here.
I'm set to 35 right now, and let's put this into recording mode so we see our peak. Reset that.
Okay.
And here we go. What did we get? If I metered this right, the collar is delivering about 90 volts when set to 35. That's considered high voltage.
90 volts.
Interestingly, even if I rack it up to 99, I was still getting about 90 volts, at least on this.
There you go. Not a big difference. Not a big difference.
Another collar operated by an app topped out at 45.
I would never use an app.
And another one triggered by a proximity.
That's not even an e-collar. So I would never use like an app. Very unreliable. There's going to be a delay between you pushing the button on your phone and the dog receiving the stimulation. I would never use an app for any kind of e-collar training. Maybe when technology greatly improves, I will, but currently no. And then this is a proximity collar. It's basically like an electronic fence that's portable, so that's not even an e-collar.
You place in your home only delivered about 20 volts in our testing.
Vibration.
Vibrating collars use a vibration motor similar to the one that makes your phone.
Yeah, we know. It basically works like a vibrating cell phone. It's got the citronella spray.
Spray or scent collars, typically using citronella, although sometimes just water. Now this one's a real crowd pleaser. It does a lot of things, including tone, vibration.
It's not a crowd pleaser. It's a pet safe, which is a piece of garbage, overpriced piece of garbage. The average e-collar that's halfway decent will cost you about $200, but don't let the price of the e-collar determine the quality. You're looking, like I said, for a few brands: e-collar Technologies, Dogtra. And then, you can use your Sport Dogs, your Martin Systems, your Garmins, so on and so forth. But you don't want to be using PetSafe. PetSafe is garbage.
Raise a scent. There's a little tiny citronella cartridge in there. I hate citronella. And since this collar is mounted about like so, below the dog's throat and aiming forward.
All right, so like all this stuff, citronella, vibration, tone, like most trainers don't really use these things. Like most like what I would call decent, mid to upper level trainers. They don't really rely on these things or use these things. You can certainly use vibration when you're dealing with deaf dogs, You can certainly use tone under some circumstances in the context of classical conditioning. But like citronella, it's like feel-good stuff. Like, I don't want to shock my dog, so I'm going to use the citronella spray because I'm going to personally feel better about that, right? Citronella, the concept is it's like very unpleasant for the dogs. They're super sensitive in the nose, so it's like, I guess, kind of like pepper spray. I don't know if any of you have ever been pepper sprayed or ever dealt with like OC gas or anything like that. That doesn't go away. Like, you get it and it stays in your system and on your system for a while, and it causes discomfort that continues. Versus, and that's why it's useless in my opinion as a positive punisher, right? Versus, if you're going to just talk about punishing a dog on a collar, citronella spray is not good because the discomfort remains, okay? I don't care that the spray is stopped. The dog's still feeling the effects of the spray. Whereas static impulse, it's there and it's gone, right? So you can even watch the video where I was taking like 200 on the e-collar and it sucked, and that was like the highest level with 2 boxes, right? But once it was gone, it was gone. There was no marks. There was no like residual sensation. That's the problem with citronella and these types of things. They're kind of like feeling good, right? Feel good solutions, but they actually don't really work that well.
That cloud of citronella goes right forward and right back into their face and in their nose. And that all sounds like kind of a quaint, nice way to modify a dog's behavior. But remember, to them, that's probably like a wall of...
Maybe if you don't think about it that much.
Florida State researchers, anyway, dogs have between 10,000 and...
I'm just going to forward through this.
Dogs are able to sniff out cancer with high accuracy, while our dumb noses miss.
You're going to talk about the sound now.
Sound training collars emit a deeper tone that is also in the human.
Listen, the tone is very meaningless to the dog unless it's followed by something predictable.
As you may have noticed, a lot
So
of
if you're going to follow
multiple
the tone with something predictable, then it can be useful. If you're not, it's just another noise. Just like vibration. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, my dog listens to vibration. The problem with vibration is it's not scalable. It's the same with the tone. It's not really scalable. It's there. And in the beginning, it might startle the dog. But very quickly, the dog gets used to it. And then they just start ignoring it. It's the same with the citronella spray. I've met many dogs that they've tried the citronella spray. It actually doesn't really work very well. Especially if the dog's committed to the behavior you're trying to break.
stimuli, sound, and scent, and vibration, and shock. So you need to stack them up, even if you're going to use this technology. One collar may do it all. These, along with a whole renaissance in pet tracking technology, have definitely brought us to what has to be the golden era of wearable pet tech. But isn't it a good idea?
It is the golden era, right? Like, there is no better time to be training dogs than now. We have so many, we have such an improved understanding of behavioral science, how dogs learn and think. And not only that, we now have tools like the electric collar that have really revolutionized dog training. And if you know what you're doing and, you're a trainer of some ability, there are amazing things that you can do with this technology in relatively short periods of time. Problem is, a lot of people kind of just use it as an electric baseball bat for fixing simple behaviors, and then they limit themselves and the dog's potential and what can be done with that device.
For that, I went to Marine Humane, just north of San Francisco. I volunteered.
Oh no, he went to the Humane Society. Here's my thing with Humane Societies. Listen, most of the time Humane Societies generally have a bias towards positive training. I think they tend to attract people that are kind of in that vein. They have that kind of perception of dogs and dog training. And they tend to not be particularly realistic. The other thing, too, is generally trainers that are any good, they don't work for the Humane Society because the Humane Society just doesn't pay very well, to be honest with you. You know, they might do some, like, volunteer work and stuff like this. But generally, like, you're not going to find top-tier trainers at a Humane Society or people that are very well versed in dealing with bad behavior or any kind of training. So she's a behaviorist, a renowned behaviorist apparently, who I've never heard of. Doesn't mean she isn't renowned.
Well, dogs bark because they're trying to tell you something. They're either excited, they're happy, they're sad, they're lonely. So they're trying to...
That's actually not completely true. Like, dogs don't just bark exclusively to try and talk to you. A lot of times they just bark because they enjoy hearing the sound of their own voice. They bark as an expression of what they're feeling on the inside. It's not necessarily a conversation that they want to have with you or with somebody else. That's why many dogs will bark regardless of whether you're around or not. Have you ever seen a dog bark at an inanimate object like a ball or something? You know, it's just, yeah, he's frustrated. He wants to get to the ball. He can't, so he's barking. You know, it's not this kind of verbal communication that they're trying to have with you. At least that's not what it is exclusively. So that's my opinion.
First of all, you want to figure out, why is my dog barking, right? It could be lack of mental stimulation, lack of physical stimulation.
True.
And your dog might be lonely. Social isolation is a huge problem for dogs. Your dog might be concerned. Maybe you left your dog out in the backyard all by himself, and he's like, whoa, this is a lot of stuff to deal with. So, you know, there's a lot of reasons for dogs to bark, and it's important for you to understand why they're barking before you just try and suppress the behavior.
So I will agree with that. I mean, if there's some simple things you can do, you know, to change how you're living with your dog, to make them less anxious and less prone to vocalizing, for sure you should do that. You know, the solution isn't always to punish a behavior, and that's for sure. My problem with this mindset is this searching for why. Searching for why I find that some people get a little bit too obsessed with this. I'm not saying that you shouldn't know the reason why or you shouldn't search for the reason why, but I find that people get so obsessed with why that they stop thinking about actually fixing the problem. Right? Like, that's really the big thing. It's like, you know, fix the problem. It's like, yeah, he's trying to go after other dogs. Why? And they go and they basically go from person to person, trainer to trainer, behaviorists, vets, whatever, looking for a reason that they basically like. And then they basically use that reason as an excuse to actually not train the dog. So it can be useful, but in many times I've seen that looking for the answer to why a dog has a problem, like years ago, I had a client. She had a reactive dog. We brought the dog in. The dog was nervous, and he would react to other dogs because they made him nervous. So we showed her very simply how to fix the problem and how to prevent him from expressing his nervousness in that way and how to, you know, deal with the problem. But, you know, she was not a very good handler, and the dog, you know, she kept putting the dog into bad situations where he really had no choice but to react. And when he did react, she didn't do the right thing, so on and so forth. Eventually, she was just like, I need to go speak to a behaviorist to find out why. I'm like, what do you think the behaviorist is going to tell you? The behaviorist is either going to make up some nonsense and give you psychotropic medication that your dog doesn't need. It really wasn't a bad dog at all. Or the behaviorist is going to tell you something about, you know, him being nervous and insecure, which is, of course, the reason why. So, okay, we know why. We need to fix the problem. Wrong. Now, I'm assuming she really doesn't know much about e-collars. When you use e-collar on yourself and when you use the e-collar on dogs, they react in a pretty consistent manner. Okay, so if you put it on yourself and you dial it up to your, you know, earliest kind of perceivable level, you're going to be like, oh, okay, that's what that feels like. That feels like, and like, what's that? You know, that's going to be kind of your reaction to the e-collar. The dog's going to be the same, right? You dial it up to their earliest kind of level of perceivability, they're going to be kind of like, oh, okay. You can see why. It's very consistent. You can see how they're reacting. Now, you turn it up to a moderate level, the dog might kind of do a head check. Same thing for you. Put it on 40 and give yourself a little tap. You're going to be like, whoa, right? The dog's no different. Okay? Now, you go up to the maximum level, your dog's probably going to do a little more than a head check, show some behavioral suppression, show definitely a little bit of like, whoa, what the hell was that? You'll do the same thing. We know why. We know how they perceive it. They perceive it the same way that we do. Now, it's certainly true that dogs have more layers of skin than we do. You know, they can be more physically tough and also more physically sensitive. But humans are the same. You get some really tough human beings and you get some really sensitive human beings. So, you know, again, the biggest thing that impacts how your dog perceives the collar is actually things like adrenaline, dopamine, you know, the level of arousal that your dog's experiencing, so on and so forth. That's really what impacts how your dog perceives the collar. They're able to kind of shut things out more than humans are. Like if a dog's really excited, like chasing a bunny, even if that dog's really sensitive, a lot of the times they're able to kind of like ignore the e-collar at a much higher level than normal, before finally reaching a level where they perceive it enough that they are stopping the chase of the bunny, right? So that's just a simple example.
They're built differently.
And even these ones that use scent, which I guess were considered a
Let's just forward through this.
alternative to the shock.
I mean, a dog's olfactory system is so much more punitive than a static or shock collar. You know, as you say, we just don't really know.
When you use one of these
Yes.
to get an animal to stop doing something, what's the downside of that? If it works, it looks like it works to a lot of people.
Right. Well, what we really want to do when we're trying to fix a behavior is we say, what is the behavior that we don't like? And then what we try to do is replace it with an alternative behavior that we do like. So instead of going straight to punishment, we want to look at the
Okay, so this is like one of the most common tropes that you see being pushed in dog training. And it makes sense when you just initially think about it, like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Let me replace the undesirable behavior with a desirable behavior. That's great. You know, a really nice and clean communication. Here's the problem. A lot of the things that your dog does, like going into the garbage, okay, are behaviors that are inherently rewarding to your dog. And that extends past going into the garbage. Your dog being leash reactive towards another dog or towards a person is actually in many cases reinforcing to your dog. Your dog's getting something out of that. He's not just, reacting exclusively. Some of them certainly are, but in many cases it's more than just, holy crap, I'm so scared that I'm doing this. It's more than that. They're getting something out of it. There's positive reinforcement there. That's why they're doing it, right? So, even your dog jumping on you, he's getting something out of that. Right? So you teaching your dog an alternate behavior to try and cope with the undesirable behavior. Yeah, your dog's just going to learn another behavior, right? You're not actually going to stop. So the common one's jumping, right? Like, I'll just teach him to sit. You know how many times I've seen a dog that's been taught to sit to fix jumping? All the dog does is jump and then sit, right? Because you didn't actually create any inhibition around the undesirable behavior. You just motivated an alternate behavior. So it's kind of like saying, if you stand up, you're going to get $100, and if you sit, you're going to get $20. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stand up. I'm going to take your $100, and then I'm going to sit, and I'm going to get my $20. All right. That's especially more of the positive training types. Their dog getting $20 all the time for various different things, right? So it's not that special. Usually they're eating out of a bowl too. Food isn't that special for them, regardless of how desirable or undesirable it is. Now, a lot of the time, what happens with trying to reinforce alternate behaviors is all your dog does is they'll still offer the initial behavior, undesirable behavior, whenever it's convenient or desirable for them, and then they'll offer the alternate behavior and get the $20, right? So that's the problem with a lot of these types of training. Is it sounds good until you really think about it. Your dog she's right in that. Why is your dog doing these things that you don't like? Well, usually your dog's doing these things because they're actually getting something out of it, right? Not all the time, but in many cases, your dog is getting something out of those undesirable behaviors. He's going in the garbage and getting $100. What are you going to do? You're going to teach him something else and give him 20? Well, it doesn't matter. He'll take your $20 and then he'll take your $100 too, right? That's real life. And that's the problem when you start getting past a lot of this kind of feel-good type stuff. You have to really think about it from a logical standpoint. You're not going to stop anything teaching an alternate behavior. You guys give that a shot. Let me know how it goes.
You don't even have to go to punishment, and punishment can degrade your relationship with your dog.
Not true. Punishment doesn't degrade your relationship with your dog. What degrades your relationship with your dog is a lack of consistency. I know this because I've punished many dogs, right? And I guarantee you that my dogs will do more for me. I watched her and her dogs come in to that. Whenever I see a trainer with dogs or a dog expert with their dogs, I always look at their dogs. Because their dogs will tell me a lot about kind of who they are as a trainer. Very soft, very kind of easy dogs. You can see, there's not much there, All right? I'm not hating. That's the kind of dog she likes. That's the kind of dog she likes. But when I watch a trainer, I like to see the type of dogs that they like to handle, the dogs that they like to own, and how those dogs express themselves, right? I guarantee you, my dogs will do a hell of a lot more for me than her, and I punish my dogs. And why? Because it's consistent. Consistency is key. If you ever, I'll let her keep going, and then I'll talk more about this.
You can make your dog afraid of you, as opposed to...
Okay, so punishment is bad because it'll make your dog afraid of you. Okay, here's an example I like to give people. Have you ever touched the hot stove, like a pan on your stove that was hot, or the element itself? Have you ever touched your stove and burned yourself? Yes, you have, right? Everybody has. Like, I know I have a bunch of times. All right? I was punished by my stove for touching the wrong part of my stove. Did you develop a general fear of your stove? No, you did not. You still use your stove every day like we all do, right? But you got burned by your stove. It was pretty horrific. It's much worse than a high-level correction on an e-collar, or really any kind of high-level correction you can do to your dog. So why do you still keep working with your stove? Are you generally afraid of your stove? No. You're not afraid of your stove because you know how to avoid the punishment. You know how to not be burned. You know you screwed up and you got burned. Now, if you said, listen, I want you to touch that hot pan, are you going to get scared? Hell yeah. Right? If for whatever reason they're like, they put a gun to my head and they said, touch the hot pan. Well, I'm going to be terrified to touch that hot pan. Right? But it's the same thing. Right? Like, you know how to avoid the punishment, so you don't have a general fear of the stove. You don't walk around the stove. But when the stove is on, you're cautious. You don't touch certain parts of it. Training your dog properly is the same thing. Your dog learns some basic respect. Listen, there are some behaviors that are the equivalent of a hot stove. Do not perform these behaviors. Okay, no need to be afraid. It's the same thing. Look, we live in a now imagine this. From the dog's perspective, what if your stove burned you randomly and in different places? Like, what if one day the handle burned you, and one day, touching a dial burned you, and it was random, and you weren't sure how to avoid getting burned by your stove? Very quickly, you're going to stop using your stove, and you're not going to want to be anywhere in the vicinity of your stove, and you're going to be terrified of your stove. But because it's predictable, you don't have a general fear of your stove. Dog training is no different. You can use extremely harsh punishments as long as they are predictable, they make sense, and they're timed appropriately to the specific behavioral contingency that you are trying to eliminate. Your dog will not develop a general fear of you. That's, again, a big piece of nonsense that you see getting perpetuated. And it's perpetuated by people that don't know because they haven't done, right? They haven't done. They've just played around in the local shelter, giving dogs hot dogs and pretending they're training. Not saying that's what's happened here, but I'm saying that that's where you see a lot of this information. A lot of people that write about this stuff and talk about this stuff and are subject matter experts, they haven't been down that road. They haven't really punished a wide variety of dogs. They haven't really seen what punishment can and cannot do in fixing behavioral issues.
Wanting to do the things that you want them to do.
Let's say you got barking. What do you do to divert that, I guess?
Right.
That's scenario. We talked about jumping. Barking is the one that everyone they lose their patience really fast.
Well, the first step is to get a little bit of a history about what's going on with the dog. When does it happen? How does it happen? What does it look like when it happens? What triggers it? And then we see if we can sort of break that down. If this triggers your dog's barking, let's see if we can get rid of the trigger, for instance. Or if your dog
That's
is...
different than hitting it with one of these stimuli to
Right.
just cut it off.
Right.
It all sounds so magical, so good, like, we just figure it all out and everything will be... Listen, obviously, if you're training your dog and you're maintaining your dog in a relatively well-balanced state of mind, they're going to offer less undesirable behaviors. That goes without saying. But a lot of the time, this always becomes a wild goose chase, and people just keep kind of being led down this path of nonsense, and they don't ever really get anywhere. I've seen this countless times with exactly the verbiage that she's using right now. And listen, the proof's in the pudding. At the end of the day, these types of people rarely, I find, can truly help dogs and can truly help owners that have any kind of actual behavioral issue. Again, keeping your dog in a stable state of mind, giving them the appropriate level of stimulation is certainly going to, minimize behaviors that you don't like, but it's definitely not going to completely eliminate them. You know how many people I've seen that think they have to exercise their dog 3 hours a day so that their dog doesn't destroy the house and doesn't bark its head off all the time? That's crazy. Most people can't live like that. There are very simple, sometimes the most effective thing that you can do and the most simplest and clearest thing for the dog that you can do is a well-timed, properly administered punishment.
Right.
We can use these manually when you're present. But then there are times when you set these things on automatic and you go away.
Right.
You have concerns about these automatic modes that are triggered by behavior, by barking.
Right. The problem is the dog is wearing these when you're not home, so you really don't know what's happening.
Have you ever heard of a camera, Wi-Fi camera?
If you have a multi-dog household, the bark of a different dog can trigger the shock for the dog that you...
That is true, which is why you don't use... So she's saying that one dog can set off another dog with a bark collar. Very true, except if you use the Sport Dog bark collars. So this is where I like Sport Dog. They make the Sport Dog Deluxe bark collar. Again, I'm not getting any money from these people. I use them in my kennel environment because they cannot set each other off. And then when I have a dog that's by itself, I like to use the Dogtra bark collars because I find they're a little bit more sensitive and reliable. But the Sport Dogs, they cannot set each other off.
Want to try and suppress the barking. And that's really unfair to the dog, because you really need to pair the negative stimulus with the behavior that's happening. So if they're getting shocked for behavior that they're not even doing, well, that can make a dog crazy. I'm curious about products, so I try and test them out to see if they, are something that we want to recommend to our clients. So I did test out the citronella bark collar on a Malinois I had who was kind of a sport barker. Meaning he would go outside, he'd look around, he'd just start doing some random barking. Now, why was he doing the barking? I call it sport barking, but I had eliminated,
We talked about this.
Lack of mental stimulation, lack of physical stimulation, all of those things. So, from my point of view, if you really didn't have any reason to bark,
Just barking for fun.
let's call it that. So I tried the citronella collar, and after a couple barks and a couple of sessions, he's like, "Oh, I can't bark." So it did suppress the barking. But what I noticed is that it started him spinning. It created an OCD behavior of him just going outside and thinking.
It's because I hate Citronella. She outsourced her correction. That's the thing, right? Like he's doing this. Put this device, magic device, and it's gonna spray him or whatever. And when you outsource your correction, it can often create these types of like side things where the dog will start, spinning or whatever it is. I'll let her continue.
Thinking about barking and instead spinning, and that was really disturbing. It was more disturbing than I even thought it would be. So of course I discontinued that experiment.
Yeah, it started spinning because Malinois are generally neurotic, okay? And they're very quick to pick up neurotic patterns like that, especially if you're not being clear in your communication. For me, I would have said no, and I would have corrected him, and he would have known, hey, Daddy doesn't like that. I'm not going to do that. There's no like confusion. He doesn't have to spin or any of this kind of stuff. He knows Daddy doesn't like that. Go outside, go to the bathroom, come back in. I lived with two very high drive Malinois for a long time, Bastion and Nova. You guys can see them on my YouTube channel. And I did IGP with both of them. And I guarantee you they were a lot more dog than, probably the ones that she had. It's just about being simple in your communication and clear. If you're not, then guess what's going to happen? This kind of stuff is going to happen.
So sometimes when you use something like this, a negative stimulus, you're kind of squeezing the balloon one place, it's bubbling up somewhere else perhaps.
Right, you're suppressing behavior as opposed to addressing the cause of the behavior.
She still didn't tell us why her Malinois was doing those things.
Before you try to stop a behavior with your pet by pushing a button on an app or on some kind of remote control, you got to dig into why it's happening.
No, not necessarily. Listen, at the end of the day, this is the problem, I think, with a lot of how we deal with even human beings now, right? All this soul searching. We got to figure out why. How about you just fix the problem? Because a lot of the time when you fix the problem, the solution, the overall solution is in and of itself. If I stopped and had this long soul-searching moment about every specific behavior my dog did that was undesirable, again, look, I've been at this for a while, so generally I know why they're doing what they're doing. But if I really did that all the time, I'd never get anywhere as a dog trainer. And it would be, quite frankly, exhausting to live with the dogs, right? At the end of the day, you just have to, apply some common sense to these things, all right? My dog's digging holes. Why is he digging the holes? No, I just don't need him to dig holes anymore, right? So I'm not saying that knowing why your dog's doing X is a bad thing, but the problem is, again, a lot of these people that go on these kind of wild goose chases, they don't actually even find the right answer. They get told some pile of nonsense by someone who doesn't know themselves and is used to making things up to kind of placate the owners and tell them things that they want to hear. They give them some medication and, some useless hot dog training, and the problem never actually goes away.
These are complex creatures. They have reasons for what they do. You got to understand.
Sometimes those reasons aren't valid. Okay, guys. So it looks like that's the end. So look, here's the thing. I am not a fan of buying an e-collar and using it as an electronic club to destroy behaviors you do not like. And for most of you, if you tried to do that, it's not going to work out well anyways. So I'm certainly a fan of that. But the problem is they examined e-collars in a very myopic way. And for, it looks like the quality of production that, they're a relatively reputable organization. I would hope that they would have said, okay, let's find e-collar. Like, they talked to some random, lady working at a humane society. Why don't you talk to Bart Bellon? Why don't you talk to, guys that have really made it their life's work to master the e-collar and train at an extremely high level? Why do they always just talk to these randoms, who no one's ever heard of, haven't really done anything? Like, this is the problem. This is the problem, is they talk to people that really don't know. They don't know about punishment. They don't know about e-collar. They don't know about all these things. They just know what somebody else told them. Or, once I put a citronella sprayer on my Malinois and he went out and he started spinning, so it's bad. Like, this is too much of how we're coming to conclusions about complex topics like e-collars. And this is why we have the problems that we do. Right? So I'm going to say this, it was a very myopic examination of the e-collar. They only examined it from the standpoint of using it to suppress behaviors that you don't like, and it really can do so much more than that. But I will say that they weren't as emotional about it as I expected them to actually be. So I'll give him that. And he wasn't completely... It didn't sound like he was completely against it. It was like he was more like, just be careful, which I will agree with. And also make sure you're not using crappy technology, okay? Yeah, they don't talk... let's get into the chat a little bit here. They don't talk to the real trainers because they don't fit the agenda of the... Yeah, I mean, there's no other reason I can think of. And it's not hard to find these guys, these world-level guys that have been at the top of the game for a couple of decades. These guys are very easy to find and they're very accessible. So, yeah, I mean, I can only think that there's a reason why. Just like these e-collar studies that they do where you find, we used trainers recommended by the manufacturer. I was like, I'm pretty sure that guy that you used that nobody knows was not recommended by the manufacturer, and you're not even using a manufacturer that anybody knows. You're using like Dog Care, some guy who's having his e-collars manufactured in China by slave labor, or something like this. It's like these are not reliable sources. Like if you wanted to learn about cars and you said, okay, let me interview, some guy who's making like Protons. Protons, for those of you that don't know, it's like an Indonesian car manufacturer. I don't even know if they still exist, but when I was in Malaysia, there was a lot of Protons driving around, okay? Nobody knows what the hell a Proton is unless you live there. It is not a well-known brand of car, okay? But that's an example. It's like, I want to know about cars, so I'm going to go talk to the Proton guy. No, you're going to go talk to Honda, Toyota, GM. These are who you're going to talk to. So... let's see here. I'm a person that is really scared of electric shock. I don't know if I would be comfortable with it, but if it works. It's not really electric shock, so I think you would be fine. Most clients are surprised. I put the e-collar on them and we use it on them before we use it on their dog, and they're generally pleasantly surprised by how easy it is. Let's just see if there's any interesting things in here in the chat, guys. Good comments, though, from a lot of people, and I'm glad I left the chat up. We'll have it up when I upload the stream. Everyone can be everything nowadays. Everyone is a trainer. Everyone is a behaviorist. It's true. It's true. I do think you have to go to university to be a behaviorist, but unfortunately, the universities being the state that they're in now, doesn't really say much. You know, I'll say this: you can read all the books and write all the essays you want on animal behavior. You need time on the leash. You need time on the leash. You know, like you have to have time on the leash. Otherwise, you will not learn. And not time on one leash. You need to have time on, you know, dozens of leashes before you really learn anything fundamental about dog training. And then from there, you know, you need to raise puppies. You need to, you know, train dogs at different stages in their life with different behavioral issues. You need to work with different breeds, so on and so forth. Otherwise, you really don't know anything about dog behavior, and in my opinion, you're not qualified. Here's the other thing. There's a lot of dog trainers that are very like myopic in what they do. Oh, I do IGP, or I do IGP for me is not as myopic as things like agility, right? Because there's 3 components involved in competing motivators, like, you know, in tracking, obedience, and protection. But still, even IGP, if you're just an IGP trainer and you haven't trained some pet dogs, you're not really equipped to be a pet dog trainer. You're certainly farther ahead than the agility trainer, which seems to be the go-to for a lot of these more positive trainers, as they just like to play in agility, which is fine, but it's not a sport that really prepares you in any way to train pet dogs and to create strong functional obedience. Yeah, if it's just one dog, I would use a Dogtra. I like their bark collars the most. Do I use perimeter e-collars? No, I don't use them. I don't find that I need them. Maybe if I lived like in a place where it was more likely the dogs would go somewhere dangerous, I might look into it. But they can be a little bit tricky. I've met a lot of dogs that are a little bit sketchy on that perimeter device, and I wouldn't fully trust them, especially if they were excited about something. Like I have dogs that are pretty high drive, and they can get pretty intense about stuff. So for sure like for instance, Gage, he would run through a perimeter fence without even really worrying about it. Like he's so well conditioned to the e-collar, and I've used it so much as a gas pedal with him that he would walk through that any kind of electric that a fence, an e-fence could create, most likely, and then go on the other side of it. So it wouldn't really be something useful for me. All right. Okay, guys. I appreciate you guys watching. And e-collar technologies are manufactured in China. Are they? Well, I'll tell you this. I prefer the quality of Dogtra, but I prefer the user interface of e-collar technologies. And I've actually found that lately their collars have improved. So I get my e-collar shipped to me from the USA. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe they do. But either way, listen, iPhones are made in China. At the end of the day, there's a difference between the standard of craftsmanship from an iPhone and from, you know, some random burner phone you're going to buy at the gas station, right? So something being from China in and of itself isn't the be-all and end-all. I'm just making a point that these e-collars that are being sold for $50 on Amazon are probably not a good idea to put on your dog. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching. It was fun. I got to do more of these reaction videos. It's actually kind of entertaining, and had a good time. Check out our online training courses, shieldk9.ca, and I'll see you guys next